I tried reasoning with myself first. Maybe they just needed directions. Maybe they were lost. Maybe no, that didn't make sense. Every day, like clockwork, the same black Jeep sat on our gate, the same two fake cops staring at me like I was some character in a bad sitcom. I took a deep breath, thinking maybe a polite note would work. I scribbled something like, "Please do not block our gate. This is private property, thank you." I slid it under the windshield wiper. The next morning, the Jeep was back, and now they had added 2 cones in front of it, like they were marking territory. I swear, one of the guys gave me a little wave. That's when panic set in, panic mixed with disbelief. How could someone be this bold? How could someone just take your property for granted like it was theirs? I called my neighbor just to vent. He laughed. "Oh yeah, those HOA patrols. You're lucky they're not writing you tickets too." Lucky, I wanted to scream. Grandpa, of course, didn't flinch. He was on the porch, rocking slowly, pipe in hand, like this was some kind of afternoon entertainment. "They're bold, I'll give them that," he said casually. "But bold doesn't mean smart." I tried to hide my excitement and fear in equal measure. "Smart, Grandpa, they're blocking our gate. Every day. They're not going anywhere. We could call the sheriff, but..." Grandpa waved me off. "You think a sheriff will show up in time to catch them in the act? Let me tell you something. When someone disrespects your land, sometimes you have to handle it yourself." He said it like it was the most obvious thing in the world. I laughed nervously. Handle it myself. With what? My anger, my words. That night, I watched from the porch as the sun dipped behind the hills, painting everything in gold and orange. The Jeep was gone for now, but I couldn't shake the feeling that tomorrow would bring the same headache. I imagined the 2 fake cops rolling up, smug as ever, parking on our gate like it was a throne, waving as if they were royalty. Grandpa, of course, saw right through my anxious packing. "Relax," he said. "You'll see tomorrow, just wait." He didn't elaborate, and I didn't press. Grandpa never explains things until the right moment. I guess that's part of his charm, and part of his terrifying unpredictability. I couldn't sleep that night. My mind raced with worst-case scenarios. What if they chained themselves to the gate? What if they called their fake HOA security team and blocked us in indefinitely? What if, God forbid, they started writing tickets for our property? By morning, my anxiety was peaking. I grabbed my phone to record. I had to get footage this time, evidence in case things escalated. Grandpa followed me outside, giving me that quiet, calm look that said he already knew what I didn't. And then I saw them, the Jeep. Like magic or some curse, it was back. The same black menace, parked perfectly in the middle of the gate. The 2 guys sat inside, sunglasses on, staring straight at me, grinning like they were in on a joke I didn't get. I raised my phone to record, muttering under my breath. "This is insane. Are we in some kind of HOA horror story?" Grandpa came up behind me, resting a hand on my shoulder. "Just watch," he said. His voice was low, calm, but there was a glint in his eyes, a glint that made my stomach tighten. I asked, "Watch what?" "Grandpa, they're just going to sit there all day." He smiled faintly, like a cat who just spotted a mouse. "They won't be sitting there forever. Tomorrow this Jeep will be gone. Don't worry about how." I blinked. "Gone, you're not gonna." He shook his head, finishing the sentence without words. I didn't know if he was joking or serious. I only knew one thing: tomorrow was going to be different. And for the first time, I realized that Grandpa didn't just protect this ranch with rules, he protected it with something else. Something the fake cops could never understand. As I walked back inside, I felt a mix of dread and anticipation. Tomorrow, I told myself, tomorrow I'd see what Grandpa had been planning all along. And deep down, I knew one thing: nothing in my life had prepared me for what was coming next. I woke up to the sound of birds chirping, thinking maybe, just maybe, the Jeep wouldn't be there today. That hope lasted exactly 7 minutes. I peeked out the window, and of course there it was. Black, smug, impossible to miss. 2 fake HOA cops inside, sunglasses on, sitting like kings on our driveway throne. I groaned. "How is this legal?" I muttered. "And how is this allowed?" Grandpa, sipping his morning coffee on the porch like nothing was wrong, just gave me that calm, steady gaze. "They're trespassing," he said, his voice quiet, almost playful. "And trespassers, well, they need reminders." I laughed nervously. "Reminders? Grandpa, they're armed with attitude, not tickets. What are you going to do? Lecture them?" He didn't answer, just took a slow sip of coffee. Then he leaned forward, eyes narrowing as he studied the Jeep like a general plotting an attack. That's when the chill ran down my spine. Grandpa doesn't usually look that serious. When he looks like that, things happen. Things I probably shouldn't watch. I tried calling the HOA again, hoping maybe a human being would understand the insanity. The voice on the other end didn't. "Sir, we don't have patrols," they repeated like a broken record. "Maybe it's a rogue volunteer." Rogue volunteer, I laughed bitterly. A rogue volunteer blocking a private ranch gate with a Jeep every day for a week. That's a full-blown siege, not a volunteer program. Grandpa chuckled softly behind me and I jumped. "See, that's the problem with people. They don't respect property, but respect can be enforced." I froze. "Grandpa, wait, what do you mean enforced?" He leaned closer and whispered like it was a secret between conspirators. "Tomorrow, you'll see. They'll learn a lesson they won't forget." I stared at him, heart pounding. "Grandpa, you're not planning." "I'm planning nothing you'd understand," he said, his grin disappearing into that calm, unreadable expression. "Just trust me." That day was unbearable. I tried to go about my normal chores, but every 10 minutes I'd glance at the Jeep. They were waving at me now, smug and unbothered, as if the ranch belonged to them. I filmed them discreetly from the porch, shaking my head. This was unreal. Around noon, I decided to confront them, politely of course. I walked down to the gate, phone in hand, and called out, "Excuse me, you can't park here. This is private property." The guys inside the Jeep just laughed. One of them leaned out the window slightly. "Relax, man, we're just doing our HOA duties. No harm." I could feel my blood boiling. "No harm, you're blocking our only entrance. Grandpa's probably gonna." I stopped. Grandpa was standing behind me now, quiet, arms crossed, just watching. His face didn't twitch, didn't flinch, didn't even breathe in an obvious way. But I knew he was thinking, and I didn't like what that meant. I sighed and walked back inside, hoping the situation wouldn't escalate. But Grandpa, in that quiet, terrifying way he has, said, "They're bold, but bold doesn't mean smart. They'll get comfortable. That's when the lesson hits hardest." I shivered. "Grandpa, this isn't funny. They could call the cops or worse, some real HOA authority. We could get sued, or..." He cut me off with a soft chuckle. "They're fake, that's the key. And when someone thinks they're untouchable, that's when you remind them they're not." I didn't sleep well that night. I kept imagining the Jeep, parked in front of the gate, and Grandpa. What exactly was he going to do? I had flashes of bulldozers, tractors, maybe even a mechanical arm coming out of nowhere. I laughed at my own imagination, but I wasn't entirely joking. By morning, the Jeep was back. Same smug faces. Same sunglasses. Same terrible sense of entitlement. Grandpa didn't even glance at it at first. Then, slowly, he walked down to the gate, inspecting the ground, the angles, the space around the Jeep. It was like he was measuring a chessboard, planning a move 10 steps ahead. I whispered to myself, "This is insane. He's actually planning something." And just when I thought it couldn't get any more tense, Grandpa muttered quietly, but loud enough for me to hear tomorrow, "It ends." I swallowed hard. I didn't know if he meant it figuratively or literally. All I knew was that I would be watching the greatest HOA showdown of my life, and that somehow, Grandpa was already 3 moves ahead. The sun hadn't even fully risen, and I was already on edge. I couldn't help it. Every morning felt like stepping into a war zone. And sure enough, the black Jeep was there, parked right on the gate like it had claimed sovereignty over our ranch. But today it was worse. As I stepped outside, I saw them. The fake HOA cops were waving at me. Not just a casual wave. They were practically performing some kind of triumphant greeting, like they had won the first battle in a war I didn't even know I was fighting. I groaned, "You've got to be kidding me." I pulled out my phone, ready to record evidence for the 100th time. One of them noticed and lifted his hand in a stop filming gesture, but the look on their faces told me they didn't care. They knew they were untouchable, or at least they thought they were. I turned to Grandpa for guidance, but he was just standing there, calm as ever, hands behind his back, eyes narrowing slightly. That look, it wasn't casual. It was focused, calculating. "They're showing off now," I muttered. "Do you see this? They're mocking us." Grandpa didn't respond. He just studied the Jeep, circling it slowly, inspecting the angles, checking the tires, measuring the distance from the gate posts with his eyes alone. It was eerie. Like he had done this before, or maybe like he was born to do this. I tried reasoning with him. "Grandpa, maybe we should just call someone, a real cop this time. Maybe the sheriff, maybe." He raised a finger. "No, calling someone will just give them more time to get comfortable. The longer they sit there, thinking they own this place, the better it is for us. They think they're untouchable. Tomorrow, they won't think that anymore." I shivered. I didn't know what he meant by tomorrow, but I knew it wouldn't be simple. Grandpa doesn't do simple. The day dragged on like a horror movie in slow motion. I worked around the ranch, but every 5 minutes, I found myself glancing at that Jeep. Every time I did, one of the guys would wave, or they'd point at me and laugh, or they'd start the engine just to make a point, the sound vibrating across the driveway like a low, mocking growl. By midday, I realized something. They weren't just trespassing, they were taunting us. And that realization made my blood boil. I wanted to storm over, yell at them, shove them out of the way, but Grandpa's calm presence stopped me. I watched him from the porch, silent, like a statue, and felt the weight of his plan in the air. Whatever he was plotting, it required patience. And he had more patience in his little finger than I had in my entire body. Later, I noticed the Jeep shifting slightly. One of the guys had a clipboard now, writing something down, probably pretending they were taking notes for the HOA. I laughed nervously. "Oh sure, your HOA notes are really going to hold up in court." Grandpa came up behind me, voice low and steady. "You see that? They're getting cocky, that's perfect. They don't know what's coming, but I do." I turned to him. "Grandpa, what are you talking about? What is coming?" He didn't answer, just nodded toward the Jeep and walked back toward the barn, whistling quietly. That whistle, it sounded like a signal. A warning, or maybe a countdown. I spent the rest of the afternoon packing, thinking about what could possibly happen tomorrow. The tension was unbearable. The Jeep had become more than a car, it was a symbol. A symbol of audacity, entitlement, and sheer foolishness. And Grandpa was going to teach them a lesson in ways I could barely imagine. As the sun began to dip behind the hills, casting long shadows across the driveway, I noticed the fake HOA cop sitting a little, looking more confident than ever. Little did they know, their arrogance was the exact thing that would be their undoing. I went to bed that night with my stomach in knots. The Jeep would be back tomorrow, of course, and when it arrived, I had a feeling this would be the day everything changed. And Grandpa had that look again. The one that said, "I've been waiting for this moment my whole life." I woke up to the familiar dread, the Jeep would be back. It didn't matter how early I got up, how quiet I tried to be, or how many notes I left under the windshield wiper. Every morning, it was the same thing, black metal, smug faces, and fake badges that meant nothing. But today felt different. There was a certain electricity in the air, something I couldn't put my finger on. Maybe it was the way Grandpa was walking around the ranch, inspecting the tractors, climbing on the barn roof, and muttering quietly to himself. Maybe it was the way he paused by the gate, squinting at the tires of the Jeep, counting something in his head. I followed him nervously. "Grandpa, what are you doing?" He didn't answer. He just pulled out a measuring tape from somewhere deep in his overalls, crouched near the gate, and started marking the ground. I blinked. Measuring tape, was he planning something? "Grandpa, this is a Jeep. You can't just—" he said, holding a finger to his lips. "Patience. Let them get comfortable. The more comfortable they are, the better it will be." I swallowed hard, but curiosity got the better of me. I crept closer, trying to see what he was measuring. Every few seconds, he'd step back, squint, adjust, and mumble numbers under his breath. It looked like, I don't know, some kind of military operation. I couldn't help but laugh nervously. "Grandpa, you're not planning to, I mean you." He gave me that smile again, the one that's half mischief, half warning. Sometimes the law doesn't help. Sometimes you have to teach lessons the hard way. I didn't sleep much that night, imagining what the hard way could mean. Bulldozers, tractors, explosions. Okay, maybe not explosions. I had no idea, but whatever Grandpa had planned, it was going to be legendary. The next morning, as usual, the Jeep rolled onto the property at its exact scheduled time. The fake HOA cops waved at me like they owned the place. I waved back, trying to act casual. My heart was hammering in my chest. Grandpa didn't move. Not yet. He stood behind the porch, arms crossed, eyes narrowed like a hawk spotting prey. Then slowly, he walked toward the barn, disappearing behind a stack of hay bales. I could hear the faint clinking of metal tools, equipment. I couldn't contain myself. I had to know what he was up to. I tiptoed closer, trying to peek around the corner. There he was, crouched next to the old bulldozer, fiddling with a lever and muttering, "Just a little adjustment here, perfect." I nearly laughed out loud. "Grandpa, are you seriously planning to move the Jeep with that thing?" He glanced at me, eyes twinkling with amusement and danger all at once. I've waited years for moments like this. Years. The rest of the morning passed slowly, every minute stretching into eternity. I tried to work around the ranch, feed the animals, do chores, but my mind kept drifting to the Jeep. I imagined the fake HOA cops, smug and unbothered, thinking they were untouchable. And I imagined Grandpa, calm as ever, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. By afternoon, I noticed some subtle changes. Grandpa had placed boards and stakes along the driveway, probably to guide the bulldozer's path. He had stacked metal beams behind the gate, and there were even a few warning signs scattered around, although they were clearly meant for show, fake warnings to lull the Jeep's occupants into a false sense of security. I realized then, this wasn't just a plan, it was a setup. Grandpa wasn't just going to move the Jeep. He was going to make them regret ever parking there, and he was doing it with precision, patience, and terrifying calm. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the ranch, I felt a mix of excitement and fear. Tomorrow, the Jeep would arrive. Tomorrow, the fake HOA cops would think they were just blocking a gate, like every day before. But tomorrow, they were walking into a trap. Grandpa stood at the porch, watching the sunset, and turned to me. "Remember," he said softly, "sometimes you have to let people think they're safe before showing them they're not." And I knew, right then, that this was going to be a day none of us would ever forget. The next morning, I woke up with a pit in my stomach and excitement I couldn't hide. Today was the day. I could feel it in the air, in the way Grandpa moved around the ranch, in the birds' nervous chirping. I couldn't tell if I was more terrified or thrilled, but either way, I knew I had front-row seats to something insane. I stepped outside just as the familiar rumble of the black Jeep echoed down the long driveway. My heart skipped a beat. There it was, parked perfectly in front of the gate, the fake HOA cops waving at me like they were performing for an audience. One of them even honked. I muttered under my breath, "I can't believe they're still doing this." Grandpa, standing calmly behind me, didn't flinch. He had that same unreadable expression, the one that makes you feel like he's 2 steps ahead in a chess game you didn't even know you were playing. I glanced around nervously. "Grandpa, are you ready for this? What exactly is the plan?" He smiled faintly, eyes never leaving the Jeep. "The plan doesn't require words, just watch." I could barely breathe as I watched him walk slowly toward the old bulldozer, parked strategically near the barn. He flipped levers, checked gauges, and moved with terrifying precision. It was as if the machine was an extension of his own body. Meanwhile, the fake HOA cops continued their casual waving, laughing at nothing, blissfully unaware of the trap forming right in front of them. I felt a mix of anxiety and glee. They had no idea what was coming. None. Grandpa climbed into the bulldozer with a calm eye. He started it up, and the low rumble vibrated through the ranch like a warning. I ducked behind a tree, phone ready, filming everything. This was history in the making. Slowly, deliberately, Grandpa maneuvered the bulldozer toward the Jeep. The fake cops noticed, finally. Their faces went from smug to confused in seconds. One of them muttered, "What is he doing?" Grandpa didn't answer. He just edged closer, the bulldozer inching forward, metal gleaming in the morning sun. I swear I could hear the Jeep's tires squeak as they shifted under the first touch of the bulldozer blade. "Grandpa," I whispered, heart pounding. Is this really happening?" He glanced at me briefly. "Just watch, this is the perfect lesson." The Jeep driver scrambled, panic spreading like wildfire across his face. "Hey, what hey, stop, you can't." Too late. The blade nudged the Jeep gently at first, like a tap on the shoulder. Then, with a slight push, it began to move. Slowly, carefully, the Jeep was sliding across the driveway. I could hear the faint crunch of gravel and metal. The fake HOA cops were screaming now, flailing inside the vehicle like fish out of water. "Pull over," one shouted. "We're HOA, you can't." Grandpa ignored them. He pushed the Jeep toward a stack of reinforced gates Grandpa had set up earlier, a path only he knew. The Jeep hit the first barrier with a loud metallic thud. The second. Then a final shove sent it tilting, wobbling precariously. The guys inside were panicking, pounding on the steering wheel, shouting. I couldn't stop laughing, partly from relief, partly from sheer disbelief. Grandpa had actually done it. He was moving the Jeep like a chess piece, showing those entitled fake cops exactly who was boss. Finally, with a final nudge, the Jeep came to a halt, wedged safely but hopelessly stuck. Metal scraped, tires skidded, and the drivers, frozen, their confidence shattered. They were completely at Grandpa's mercy. He climbed down from the bulldozer, wiping his hands on his overalls like he had just finished an ordinary chore. Calm, cool, collected, and terrifying. I ran up to him, barely able to speak. Grandpa, that was incredible. Oh my God, they're trapped. He just smiled. Sometimes, letting them think they're untouchable makes the lesson even. I glanced back at the Jeep. The fake HOA cops were still inside, muttering curses, pounding the dashboard, realizing that the tables had turned. I couldn't stop laughing. They had thought they owned our ranch, but in reality, they had walked straight into Grandpa's trap. And in that moment, I realized something. Grandpa wasn't just protecting the ranch. He was protecting our pride, our dignity, our peace of mind. And he had done it with patience, precision, and just the right touch of theatrical flair. As we walked back toward the house, Grandpa gave me a glance that made my stomach tighten. "Tomorrow," he said softly, "we make sure they never forget this." I swallowed. I didn't know what he meant, but I had a feeling the climax of this story was only just beginning. I could hardly believe my eyes as I watched Grandpa climb into the bulldozer once more. The Jeep was wedged just enough to look like it might still escape, but I knew better. Grandpa had been planning this for days, moving with the patience and precision of someone who had been waiting their entire life for the perfect moment. The fake HOA cops were still inside, pounding the steering wheel, shouting curses at him like he was some kind of villain in a bad movie. "You can't do this. Stop, HOA." I couldn't help but laugh. Oh, they so didn't see this coming. Grandpa adjusted the blade of the bulldozer carefully, like a painter adding final touches to a masterpiece. He didn't rush. Every move was deliberate, measured, and terrifyingly precise. The Jeep creaked under the weight, metal groaning and glass rattling. The drivers' faces went from confusion to panic in seconds. One of them started shouting, "This isn't legal. You can't destroy HOA property." Grandpa didn't even glance at him. He pushed the Jeep slightly to the side, nudging it just enough to make the metal crunch satisfyingly against the reinforced posts Grandpa had set up. Then he pressed the pedal down slowly. The Jeep tilted, and I could hear tires scraping, glass chipping. The men inside shrieked as their sense of superiority crumbled around them. I was frozen, phone in hand, recording every second. The sound of metal bending and the Jeep scraping against the barriers was music to my ears. Grandpa's expression was calm, almost bored, but his eyes were sharp, calculating. This wasn't just crushing a Jeep. This was delivering a lesson in humility that those two would never forget. "Stop, we're filing complaints. You'll regret this," one of them screamed, practically sobbing. Grandpa just pushed harder. "I've been waiting years for this," he muttered under his breath. Years. The Jeep finally hit the last reinforced barrier with a loud, echoing crash. It shuddered, rocked, and then settled in place like a defeated animal. The doors rattled as the fake HOA cops tried to exit, but the angle made it almost impossible. They were trapped in their own arrogance. I ran up to Grandpa, trying not to laugh too loudly. "Grandpa, that was insane. They're stuck." He wiped his hands on his overalls like he had just finished some mundane chore. Calm, cool, collected, terrifyingly unshaken. "Sometimes," he said slowly, "people need a reminder that your property is exactly that, yours. They thought they could intimidate us. They were wrong." I looked back at the Jeep. The fake HOA cops were frantic now, bashing on the doors, muttering threats that no one would ever take seriously. They had finally realized they weren't in charge. They weren't untouchable. They were utterly humiliated. I couldn't stop laughing. "Grandpa, they actually thought they could boss us around. They've been coming here every day, acting like kings, and now look at them." He just smiled faintly. Pride comes before a fall, son, and some people need a very, very loud wake-up call. I glanced at the Jeep again. Metal crumpled in just the right places, tires slightly shredded, the whole thing looking like it had survived some minor apocalypse. And inside, the fake HOA cops were still yelling, still panicking, still completely powerless. I realized then something important. This wasn't just about a Jeep or a gate. It was about respect. About showing people that entitlement and arrogance only get you so far. Grandpa had done it with patience, precision, and a little bit of old-school ranch know-how. By the time we walked back toward the house, the sun was dipping low behind the hills. The Jeep sat crushed, the fake HOA cops still trapped inside, and the ranch felt victorious, triumphant, like we had finally taken back what was ours. Grandpa gave me a glance that made my stomach tighten. "Tomorrow," he said softly, "we make sure they never forget this." I swallowed hard. I didn't know what he meant. But I had a feeling the final chapter of this story was just around the corner, and that the fake HOA cops' reign of arrogance was coming to a complete and utter end. And for the first time in days, I felt a strange sense of calm. Grandpa had handled it. The Jeep was crushed, the lesson was delivered, and the ranch, our home, was safe once more. The day after the Jeep was crushed, the ranch felt different, almost peaceful. The sun rose over our property without the usual daily rumble of entitlement blocking the gate. For the first time in a week, I felt like we had won. But I knew better. Grandpa, of course, was already moving around the ranch like nothing had happened. Calm, collected, serene. But there was a spark in his eyes, like he knew the storm wasn't over yet. Sure enough, by mid-morning, the phone started ringing. And it wasn't just any call, it was the HOA. "Sir," a frantic voice sputtered, We've received complaints about property damage, the Jeep we demand." I cut in, barely holding back laughter. "Oh, you mean the Jeep that was trespassing on our property every day this week?" Silence, then sputtering, then more incoherent HOA panic. Grandpa chuckled softly from his chair, pipe in hand. "See, they think they're in charge, they really don't get it." I peeked over at the gate. The Jeep, now a crumpled heap, sat like a monument to arrogance. I swear, the metal gleamed in the sunlight like a trophy. And inside, the two fake HOA cops were still trying to explain themselves, waving papers, pointing at everything, like their authority still meant something. It didn't. Grandpa rose slowly, hands in his pockets, and walked toward the Jeep. "You've got a little mess to clean up," he said quietly, loud enough for me to hear. The cops froze. He didn't even have to raise his voice. That calm authority, absolute, unshakable, was enough to silence them. I couldn't help but giggle. "Grandpa, you're terrifying." He turned to me, a faint smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "Sometimes, that's exactly what people need." By afternoon, letters started arriving. HOA letters, threats of legal action, claims that the Jeep was priceless property and that Grandpa had somehow committed vandalism. I read them aloud, laughing so hard I cried. "Priceless," I said. "They think a Jeep that trespassed daily on a private ranch is priceless." Grandpa crushed it, and it looks like scrap metal. Grandpa just nodded. "They need paperwork, we have evidence." I pulled up the videos I'd recorded every day. The Jeep parked, blocking the gate. The fake cops smirking, the bulldozer nudging it carefully. Every detail captured, crystal clear, legal proof. And when combined with Grandpa's calm testimony, there was no way the HOA could spin this as anything other than trespassing, and their own arrogance backfiring spectacularly. By evening, the fake HOA cops finally came to the ranch in person. I watched from the porch, heart pounding, as they shuffled nervously, trying to act important, but looking every bit like the entitled fools they were. Grandpa didn't move from his chair, he didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. Just standing there, arms crossed, eyes steady, he radiated authority. The cops stammered through explanations, threats, and demands, but it was all noise. "Your Jeep was trespassing," Grandpa said softly. "You have no authority here. You've caused damage and intimidation. Now leave and never come back." The fake cops glared, sputtered, tried one last desperate argument. Grandpa just stood silently, letting the silence stretch, letting their own shame weigh down on them. And slowly they left. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. "Grandpa, you didn't even have to touch them." He smiled faintly. "Sometimes the lesson doesn't require violence. Sometimes it requires patience, timing, and letting people see the consequences of their arrogance." I glanced at the crumpled Jeep one last time. It wasn't just scrap metal, it was proof. Proof that boldness without respect has consequences, and that some people learn lessons the hard way. That night the ranch was quiet, the gate was open. The fake HOA cops were gone for good, and I realized something important. Grandpa hadn't just protected the ranch. He had protected our pride, our peace of mind, and our dignity. As I went to bed, I knew one thing for sure. Tomorrow, the ranch would feel like ours again. But the story of the Jeep, the fake HOA cops, and Grandpa's patience, that would be remembered forever. The morning after the confrontation felt surreal. The sun rose over our ranch, golden light spilling across the fields, and for the first time in a week, the gate was clear. The Jeep was gone, or rather, a crumpled heap of metal sat at the side, a monument to arrogance and bad decisions. I could hardly believe it was finally over. Grandpa was on the porch, rocking slowly, pipe in hand, calm as ever. But I could tell from the faint twinkle in his eyes that he was quietly savoring the moment. He'd done more than move a Jeep, he'd sent a message. A loud, unforgettable message. I stepped outside, still laughing softly to myself. "Grandpa, you actually did it. The Jeep is gone, the fake HOA cops are gone, it's really over, isn't it?" He took a slow sip of coffee and nodded. "Over, maybe, but some lessons last a lifetime." I glanced toward the remains of the Jeep, remembering the panic on those fake cops' faces. They had thought they owned the ranch. They had thought arrogance and entitlement were enough to keep us in check. But Grandpa had shown them otherwise, with patience, precision, and a little creative genius. By mid-morning, word had spread. Neighbors came by, curious, whispering about the Jeep incident and the grandpa bulldozer stunt. I couldn't help but grin. People were stunned, laughing, shaking their heads. Some even congratulated us. Some, I swear, were secretly taking notes. "Your grandfather is something else," one neighbor said. "I've never seen anyone handle entitlement like that." I nodded proudly. He doesn't just protect the ranch, he protects everyone's dignity around here. The HOA, of course, tried one last desperate attempt. Letters, threats, even some vague hints at legal action. But we had evidence, every video, every measurement, every witness. And more importantly, we had Grandpa. Calm, confident, and utterly unshakable. The HOA's bluff didn't stand a chance. By the afternoon, the fake HOA cops had disappeared from the neighborhood entirely. No more Jeep on the gate. No more smirks, no more shouting. Their arrogance had been dismantled, piece by piece, by nothing more than common sense, patience, and a bulldozer guided by Grandpa's steady hands. I couldn't stop thinking about the lesson I'd learned. It wasn't just about property, or rules, or even black Jeeps parked in your way. It was about patience. It was about timing. And it was about standing your ground with quiet confidence until those who think they're untouchable realize exactly how wrong they are. That evening, as the sun dipped low over the ranch, Grandpa and I sat on the porch together, watching the sky turn pink and gold. The animals grazed quietly. The wind rustled the trees. For the first time in days, I felt complete peace. I looked at Grandpa and said, "I have to admit, I never thought we'd see the Jeep move without calling the real authorities. But you made it happen, and it was brilliant." He chuckled softly, a slow, satisfied sound. "Sometimes the law isn't enough. Sometimes you need action, and patience, and a little bit of fun." I laughed, shaking my head. Fun, that was terrifying. He gave me that faint grin again. The best lessons always are. By nightfall, the ranch was quiet. The gate was open. The Jeep was scrap. The fake HOA cops had vanished from our lives, and I hoped from the neighborhood entirely. I realized then that the victory wasn't just about crushing a Jeep. It was about taking back control, standing up to entitlement, and knowing that even in the face of boldness and arrogance, patience and precision always win. Grandpa leaned back in his chair, pipe in hand, eyes twinkling. "Remember this, son. People like that, they think rules don't apply to them. But patience and planning, that applies to everyone, always." I nodded. I'll never forget Grandpa, not the Jeep, not the lesson, not any of it. And for the first time in a week, I felt completely, utterly free. The ranch was ours. The gate was ours. And the lesson, that boldness without respect always meets consequences, would be remembered forever. Grandpa smiled faintly, rocking slowly in his chair. And I knew in that moment that the legend of the Jeep and the bulldozer and the fake HOA cops would be told for years to come. Victory, I realized, didn't need fanfare. It just needed patience and Grandpa. Every HOA has a story on HOA Headaches. You'll hear the ones they tried to bury. Subscribe today.